This is the Off-World UFO Report, and if you've been following the news, you know that the UAP Task Force dropped another UFO video of an object buzzing by one of our fighter jets. This is not a surprise for those of us who have been paying attention because it happens all over the world, and a lot of them are moving so fast that they can't be seen with the naked eye. They have to be recorded by video and then slowed way down just to be able to see them in a few frames because they're traveling so fast.
There's 5 distinct observables that set this technology, as I mentioned earlier, aside from everything we have in our inventory. The first is hypersonic velocity.
You heard the man, that's Luis Elizondo, and he was involved in the study of this phenomenon. So we're going to watch hypersonic objects and see how they perform. Then we're going to listen to the objections of skeptics and weigh the evidence. Now watch this one. Oh, you missed it. You can barely see it. You have to slow it down to about 10% or less to see this thing fly by. Some of the objects that have been caught on video seem to stretch or bend time and space. Watch this. Whoa, huh? You blink and you miss it. But something went by. This one was filmed in Alaska, and the object is much bigger, like 30 meters long. Right up into the clouds. One thing you'll notice is that they can make really, really fast turns. They can also accelerate from a standing hover to a hypersonic velocity, which is over Mach 5. Watch this. It looks like it just was edited out, but no, it actually started moving from a standing hover to Mach 6 or 7. It's moving so fast that the image seems to stretch.
The ability to change directions instantly. And when I say instantly, I mean human beings can withstand about 9 G forces. Some of our best aircraft can withstand about 16 Gs. These things are doing 300, 400, 600 Gs in mid-flight.
This video's been around for a while. You'll see that it slows down in about a second and then speeds off. And it's probably about as big as a beach ball or a car tire.
Then there's hypersonic velocity. That is speeds that by definition are Mach 5 or above. Very, very fast. We do have some technology. You mentioned Russian hypersonics and things like that. You know, there are technologies that can go that fast, but then again, you don't expect a hypersonic aircraft to do a 90-degree turn. To put that into context, our SR-71 Blackbird, when at 3,200 miles an hour, wants to take a right-hand turn, it takes roughly half the state of Ohio to do it. You don't expect it to just kind of do this.
This was filmed in Korea. I like to call it the flying cowboy hat.
That was a bug.
These guys are funny.
So bug.
They are obnoxious, and they take their own opinions as fact. But that's where most people are. How do you make sense of something with anomalous shape that changes direction instantaneously and flies faster than you can perceive it with your eyes? You have to slow it down to a minuscule fraction of the normal speed of your video, and then it has this weird shape. Like, it changes its trajectory from one moment to the next, like 1 millisecond to the next. So it's not hard to understand why a lot of fools don't understand and don't have the patience to do any analysis on this kind of phenomenon. And this object seems to recede into the forest somewhere and just disappear. goes all slow. Okay. This next one was also filmed in South Korea.
The drone footage shows how a luminous object appears in the distance, which suddenly turns at an angle of 90 degrees and rushes straight towards the unmanned vehicle at incredible speed. Pyeongtaek is a city in Gyeonggi Province, South Korea. It was there that a local resident launched a drone with a camera on board. According to the drone operator, the UFO was 1.3 kilometers away from the drone when it spotted it and made a 90-degree turn over the forest near General Wang Pyungkin's grave in Pyeongtaek and flew to the front of Songtan, where the drone is located.
So this one is very strange as usual. If you look really closely, it seems like it has a rotor, different than many other UFOs. Most of them don't have any flight services, don't have any wings, don't have a propeller, don't have any emissions. This one, for example, which was recorded by a drone flying very quickly out over the ocean. Where was it going? We don't know, but as Lou Elizondo said, there's often a correlation with water. This next video was recorded in Utah, and it's pretty popular. But I want to play the debunkers from Corridor Crew first, and then we'll actually have somebody serious.
Sam Chortek and Jimmy Chappie released never-before seen footage of a UFO.
I'm getting Project Loon vibes right now.
I'm excited.
All right, and in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, aliens.
Oh,
That was a bug.
come on.
That's a bug.
Come on.
That's a bug. I've seen that before in my own drone footage.
That's what. They think that's an alien. They think that's an alien. What? I was expecting like something in the sky.
So bug. I'm not kidding. I've literally had that exact thing show up in my own drone footage before, and it's because you literally almost hit a bug. But a bug this far away from a tiny little lens is going to look massive and fast. The first frame where you can clearly see the bug starting to show up is probably just like 5 to 10 feet in front of the drone.
Yeah.
And the only other thing you can see in the scene is probably like 100 or 200 feet away, at least. The bug probably isn't actually moving that fast. The drone, being so far away from anything to give the perspective of how fast it's moving, is actually probably moving at around like 30-ish, 40 miles an hour. So a bug moving in the other direction, just barely missing the camera lens, just going shoo, will give the illusion that it's some crazy fast thing.
If it was actually like the size of like a spaceship, you would be leaving shockwaves and like vapor trails and like
Yeah, the fastest any sort of like piloted aircraft can go is around Mach 3, and like the space shuttle coming in for landing, I think that comes in at somewhere around like 7 or 8. Once it starts slowing down, because air at high speeds is literally molasses. And so if that bug actually was the size of a spaceship and that mountain is like, what, 3 miles away, it'd have to be going like Mach 15.
I mean the air would light on fire.
There's no way it's a spaceship at Mach 15. I can't believe they considered that to be a UFO.
Yeah, this is not a UFO, this is UFB.
Maybe it's a grasshopper.
We have no idea what kind of bug it is.
Yeah.
It could be an alien bug.
That's a good point, Sam. It could be an alien bug.
Have you ever seen a bug flying without wings? Not any bug I've ever seen. And actually, it didn't come from 10 feet away. It came from probably about 4 or 5 miles away. But in order to learn that, you actually have to put some effort into watching the video, like this guy did. So, Brian J. Hanley published a video a few days after the original came out, and then a guy that goes by the moniker of Propellerhead on YouTube, his name is Rob Worst, he added on to this analysis in great detail. The video was shot in 2016 and his analysis was done in 2019. So he analyzes the way that the foreground and the background interact, observe. Rob locates where the object first can be detected, which the corridor crew completely missed.
Haha, you fool!
He noticed that it disappears for a moment behind a ridge that he pointed out a few minutes ago. So we see it floating away from the middle of the mountain for some reason. And as the drone goes forward, all of the points that he mentions here move in the opposite direction of the objects in the foreground, all these trees. So he's pointing out the parallax shift. The significance of this is that parallax is inversely proportional to the distance. So the greater the distance, the smaller the parallax. Then, once it moves away from the mountain and over the ridge, it gains speed, which I guess you can see in this elongation that the object has as it does this swing around to whatever this degree turn is. It's not 90 degrees, but it's a pretty fast turn. But he doesn't stop without addressing the bug theory, which he absolutely destroys. Beyond a shadow of a doubt, if it actually needed to be disproven from the obvious lack of wings and white color. Nevertheless, watch on, motherfuckers. He actually found a bug in the footage, and now he's gonna show it to you close up. I didn't see this bug, but there is a bug in this video.
That was a bug!
Truly a masterful identification. And this one has wings.
So bug.
Then he goes into exhaustive detail in how far the bug was able to travel versus the UFO in the same amount of time, but coming from a much, much longer distance away. And then in covering the distance between the ridge and the drone, it only takes about 1 or 2 seconds, which you could presume is a couple of miles. The cameraman estimated that it was about 3 miles, so on that the corridor crew was pretty close. Just when you thought the issue was settled, the discussion continues. Mick West, the patron saint of skeptics, jumped into the debate, and the author of the video, who goes by Propellerhead, decided that he was maybe wrong, and maybe it was a seed or a small object like a piece of paper flying through the wind.
To the side of the video and noticed how much stuff was floating in the air. bugs, seeds, etc., some of which you can see in his video. We seem to make him move a lot closer to the small object hypothesis.
Because it is a wild, natural place. You know, there's a lot of stuff in the air. I really think it's possible that the Utah video was something that was in the air.
Meanwhile, people started to discuss if it was a bird. We found a bunch of other similar videos. Jay Lamb raised some objections. Why didn't a 9,000 mile per hour craft ruffle the trees a bit? He suggested a bird might be a better fit. That day on Metadebunk, Truth Serum's video had prompted a discussion about the field of view and the frame rate and the calculated size and speed, and we mostly moved towards it being smaller than a bird. On March the 8th, I agreed a bug was likely, but might also be something blowing in the wind like a seed or a bit of paper. Next month, on March the 23rd, Propellerhead, Rob Waters, updated his analysis with a video called Beaver, Utah, Another Way to See It?, where he now realized his parallax argument is not conclusive because the object is moving, and nor is the ridgeline argument. Rob starts to look at things like field of view and how quickly things of different sides approach the camera. He doesn't do too much math, but he does do a lot of practical experiments, and eventually he concludes that something small floating in the air can't be ruled out.
You know, it just floats in the air. Now, am I saying that's what it is? I just think that it's neat that we've looked at this another way and we found another possible explanation.
Back on Metadebunk, the bug, or something small hypothesis remains strong. We also found a few more examples in July and later in October that seem to support it.
Truly, you have a dizzying intellect.
Mick West is a retired game developer with a bachelor's degree in computer science. I have a higher degree than this charlatan. He has no authority. His carefully manicured Wikipedia page tries to trump up his accomplishments, but he knows jack shit about science. He's boring. And so is most of the discussion on his bunk meta site. For 8 months, they debated, putting different views and different videos and different images that look nothing like the white object in the video. They think that they're getting somewhere, and here Mick notices that the object disappeared for a moment, and that seems to mean something to him, although I fail to see what it is. And then he finds these several other videos that he claims are evidence of a fast walker. It's coming up, where he says that these objects flying through videos are a glitch in the film. And this is where Mick reveals his utter oblivious hypocrisy, because he accuses UFO believers of motivated reasoning. The motivated reasoning is happening in Mick's head. He's the one that starts with the certainty there's no such thing as UFOs, and then he works backwards because he only has a few choices and they're all prosaic and lame, but he sticks with them. Oh, it's a piece of paper flying through the air faster than you can even see it. Accusing our really powerful cameras of sorcery and that they put things out of focus when top scientists and the government are saying the opposite.
These objects fly between Mach 5 and Mach 20 times the speed of sound. These objects can drop 70,000 feet within a matter of seconds. These objects can zigzag, creating g-forces that are several hundred times the force of gravity, enough to crush the bones of any humans. These objects can fly without creating any exhaust. In other words, quote, they're not ours, unquote, as stated by one Pentagon official. Then the next question is, if they're not ours, then whose are they?
And his explanations are actually more complicated than just saying, yeah, that's unidentified. Let's just say it's unidentified. It's not a fucking bug, it's not a piece of paper, it's not a seed. But maybe, says Mick, it's an insect that flies 3,000 miles per hour. Maybe it's a white wall tire thrown by Zeus. Maybe it's an albino dragonfly. Or, oh, I know, a softball thrown by Uncle Rico. Or maybe it was poplar fluff. Yeah, poplar fluff. I have no idea why people cower in the face of skeptics. But Mick actually spilled his guts to a New Yorker reporter years ago, and he said that when he was a kid, he read a magazine that got him scared about crypto beasts and UFOs. So he became obsessed with debunking out of anger because of the magazine that scared him when he was a little boy. He didn't want this nonsense to affect other people. So, in his pursuit of stopping disinformation, he became an agent of disinformation because now the government is trying to sound the alarm about the implications of this real technology that we're confronting. But for Mick, it doesn't matter how many videos the Navy or Air Force drops, or how many top officials or scientists go before Congress and say stuff like this.
And is this one of the phenomena that we can't explain?
I do not have an explanation for what this specific object is.
For too long, the stigma associated with UAPs has gotten in the way of good intelligence analysis. Pilots avoided reporting or were laughed at when they did. DoD officials relegated the issue to the back room or swept it under the rug entirely, fearful of a skeptical national security community. Today, we know better. UAPs are unexplained, it's true, but they are real. They need to be investigated, and many threats they pose need to be mitigated.
You know that China's doing it. We know that Russia, which is led by someone who was head of the KGB, you know they're doing it, and so we better take a look at it too. We've got a volume of research that was done and put it out to bid, and $22 million worth of research. And it was very interesting because it showed that not 2 people, 4 people, 6 people, 20 people, but hundreds and hundreds of people have seen these things, sometimes all at the same time.
So without further ado, let's hear Mick West extol all the ways that top aviators don't know how to do their jobs and don't understand how their own equipment works.
They think that's an alien?
Alright, well let's start with the FLIR video. That's the oldest video. The FLIR video is actually a very small video. It's like 200 pixels wide or something like that. Very, very small and blurry. And it shows like a dark dot in the distance, dark kind of shape. And the camera operator who's in this jet following this thing is cycling through different cameras trying to get a better look at it, but you never really get any good look at it. The object itself, if you pay attention to what's going on, the object itself never actually moves on the center of the screen. It does appear to move, but that's only because the camera is changing. It changes lenses between like a narrow field of view and a wider field of view, or it's changing between the infrared mode and the TV mode, the visible light mode. So whenever it has to change from one camera to another, it loses the lock on the object and has to reacquire it. So what we're seeing basically is an essentially static object. It is actually moving. It's because you can see that the camera is tracking from right to left, because you can see the numbers, the heading at the top of the screen changes. So it is moving. So it's entirely consistent with it being a plane that's very far away, probably somewhere in the range of 50 to 100 miles away. And the jet that's following it, again, perhaps doesn't realize just how far away it is, and thinks that it's a little bit closer and hence moving a little bit differently, or perhaps is a bit smaller than it actually is. It could be a quite large plane 100 miles away.
Right, so if I can ask, why didn't they catch that on the radar then? Why weren't they able to identify that as an aircraft already?
It wasn't where they thought it was. It's the same thing with the Chilean case. Radar's great if you know where to look, but if you're looking in like sector A and it's in sector Q, then you're not going to see it in sector A. So if they were just looking in a range of say like 40 miles in front of them, they're not going to see it on the radar. He got a ping on his radar, I think, and you see the little range crop up, but it shows 99.99, which means it wasn't able to get an actual range distance, which could mean that it was blocking it somehow, but it could also just mean that it was just too far away to get an accurate reading. I think that's probably what happened. He thought there was something close to him. He asked the ship perhaps if there was something next to them, and they looked directly in front of him and didn't see it, but it was really over here, so that's why they didn't see it.
But it's not just politicians and scientists who have access to classified information that Mick West is putting himself above. It's really experienced Air Force flight instructors and professionals in the aerospace industry. Chad Underwood was part of the Black Aces squadron, and he knew what he was doing. He also depended on top radar operators in the Nimitz aircraft carrier. The radar system was shut down on the Nimitz just to make sure that they weren't making any mistakes, and the objects became more clear when they restarted it. They studied it for weeks before and after the sighting. So Chad Underwood described exactly what he saw, and he made no bones about when you can see an object on the FLIR and when it appears on radar. Look at what he's saying here. I was able to acquire it on the radar, the infrared camera, and these guys have seen all kinds of aircraft, all kinds of missiles, and these guys said that this object was behaving erratically, nothing like a normal aircraft. It was moving side to side very, very quickly. And yet, Mick West says that he knows better than these very experienced pilots, the most experienced pilots in the US Air Force. Mick West, an amateur pilot and retired game developer who runs a website with design like Craigslist. What a joke.
Yeah, now of course along with these videos there is the commentary, of course, on that last one especially, that's kind of really stands out, but we've also heard from some pilots actually offer, they've been appearing on podcasts and things, offering their opinions. In particular, David Fravor has been talking about how he thinks that this is really an object of non-terrestrial origin with respect to the USS Nimitz incident. Now, it's kind of difficult, I guess, to take this expertise in 3D geometry, mechanics, and apply that to human sociology, because this is very different. This is someone's personal testimony. But how do you weigh that testimony in the body of evidence what do you think he saw? Do you think that it was a hallucination, or do you think he was just mistaken?
I think, first of all, you've got to remember that these are two different incidents within the Nimitz encounter. David Fravor went out, and there was another pilot in another plane and two other officers there, and they saw something. They thought they flew around, and they thought it flew off into the distance. And then they went back to the ship, and then later another plane flew out in not the exact same area and wasn't particularly looking for that particular thing. And that plane got a ping, and they keep your eyes open. And he took this video. Fravor's account of the object is something that's zigzagging all over the place. There's also radar accounts, the radar people said that they saw it flying from 80,000 to sea level in a fraction of a second, which is pretty much impossible. But none of these accounts actually match. They're all kind of different things. So from my perspective, it seems like there's the radar stuff, which is radar glitches. There's the video, which is video of a distant plane. And then there's David Fravor's account, which I don't really know what it is. I think the best theory I've kind of come up with is that when he thought he was flying around in a circle, and this thing was mirroring him on the other side of the circle, so there's two things flying around the circle. It's actually kind of similar to what we see in the GoFast thing, kind of a parallax thing. There may have been something in the middle, like maybe a balloon or some kind of drone or something like that. It was in the middle of this circle, and he thought it was on the far side of the circle. So there's this thing, like a balloon or something, is flying around it. He thinks it's flying around following him, but really what he's seeing is something that's not moving, and it's just seeing this illusion. And then he decides he decides to cut across the middle of this circle to the other side. And then he says he sees this thing coming towards him and it zips by him and flies off into the distance. Now, if he's in the mindset that this was something on the other side of a circle when it's actually in the middle of the circle, then when he decides to go across the circle, it's going to look like it is flying towards him from the other side of the circle. And because it gets towards him much quicker than he anticipates, because it's only halfway across the circle, it's going to look like it zips by him. It'll look like it's accelerating off into the distance. So I think if there was something that he saw, and you have no reason to doubt him, then it probably was some kind of loss of situational awareness type thing like that.
The hubris of this charlatan is impressive. First, he suggests that a pilot with 18 years experience has a massive loss of situational awareness, and basically he and all of the people flying with him lack depth perception and can't tell what's happening in front of them, which is laughable. Then he suggests that a whole aircraft carrier's radar system, a multi-million-dollar system, is just wrong because what it perceived, it's impossible. And all the while, he maintains his quiet, low-key arrogance and talks in circles and really makes no sense.
Who are you who are so wise in the ways of science?
I'm Mick West,
King of the Britons. My liege. Good tonight. Will you come with me
Debunk?
and join us at the round table?
No, because you're a fraud.
Former Navy pilot Lieutenant Ryan Graves calls whatever is out there a security risk. He told us his F-18 squadron began seeing UAPs hovering over restricted airspace southeast of Virginia Beach in 2014 when they updated their jet's radar, making it possible to zero in with infrared targeting cameras.
So you're seeing it both with the radar and with the infrared, and that tells you that there is something out there.
Pretty hard to spoof that.
Lieutenant Graves told us pilots training off the Atlantic coast see things like that all the time.
Every day for at least a couple of years.
Wait a minute, every day for a couple of years?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't see an exhaust plume.
Including this one, off the coast of Jacksonville, Florida in 2015, captured on a targeting camera by members of Graves' squadron.
What I think is going on with the gimbal video is that it's actually the glare from the infrared, The engines of a plane are very, very hot, and they show up in the heat-sensitive camera essentially as bright lights. Now, in this video, it's inverted, so hot is black, so it looks like a black object, and you've got the shape of the glare. Now, you're familiar with in astronomy, you often see what looks like a cross over a star or a celestial object of some sort because of the diffraction effect. And this is actual, the aperture of the camera has an effect on what the glare looks like. And what's happening, I think, here is that you're getting essentially a flying saucer-shaped glare, which I've actually replicated with little cameras I have on my own. And it's because it's so bright, because the engine is so hot, it's obscuring the actual outline of the plane, which you might see in the infrared, which it wouldn't be very hot anyway, so you wouldn't see very much of it. So all you're seeing is this glare of the engine. Now, where it gets confusing is where it seems to rotate.
Yeah. And
this is quite a difficult thing to explain to people, but essentially, it's kind of a limitation of the camera system that they have. They mount it in such a way that it can only rotate along its forward axis, and it can only do a kind of an up and down rotation around one horizontal axis. And to be able to track something, you actually need 3 axes of rotation. And this is something I've replicated this exact thing with camera setups of my own, using like a small camera mounted on an arm and rotating it, and then use flying derotation. And you see this exact same thing, a kind of a saucer-shaped glare that rotates independently of the horizon, which happens to be my garage.
One of the many problems with Mick West's garage lab experiment is that he doesn't realize that this was restricted airspace. So he's suggesting that not only did the pilots mistake the object for a plane, but that also the radar operators would make the same mistake, and that a plane would be in restricted airspace. But what stands out to me is how much he is afraid and hangs on desperately to what he thinks science is supposed to do, which is to protect his ideology from the unknown, the boogeyman, the things that go bump in the night. Because this is a grown-ass man who has basically never gotten over the things that scared him when he was a little boy. Science is supposed to be intrepid. Scientists have to be courageous because they have to confront things that don't fit our models, and we have to adapt. Mick West is fundamentally unable to adapt.
The who, the her.
So all of these suggestions contemplate something that we've never seen before, and yet the academic mainstream prefer to stick with those rather than contemplate the other possibility that it may have been artificial in origin, which I think is as plausible as this and perhaps even more.
Reminds me of a paraphrase that you offer in your book, and I think it was Galileo, that said, "Evidence doesn't care about approval," which seems to be, something that's meaningful to you philosophically in the way that you approach your science.
Yes, and in fact, this morning I submitted a new article to Scientific American that was just accepted a couple of hours ago, and the title of this essay was, "Why is anomalous evidence so unpopular?" What I mean by that is, if we look a century back, quantum mechanics was discovered completely unexpectedly, and in fact Albert Einstein resisted the fundamental principles of quantum mechanics and argued that it cannot have spooky action at a distance, and he was wrong. We now have experiments that demonstrate that he was wrong. And quantum mechanics was sort of like a bone stuck in the throat of physicists for a century now, and it was not expected. It's still a major challenge for us to understand its meaning, and it was forced upon us by experimental data, evidence. And so the fundamental lesson from that is we should pay attention to evidence rather than to our prejudice. There used to be people that were very sure about their notion, that they were the philosophers during the days of Galileo, and they said, we don't need to look through your telescope, they said to Galileo. We know that the sun moves around the earth, and they put him in house arrest. Now, what did they accomplish by that? They just maintained their ignorance, and the earth continued to move around the sun. It didn't change. If we don't look through our windows and say, we don't have neighbors, just give me extraordinary evidence before I would be willing to discuss the possibility that I'm not the smartest kid on the block. If you just say I need extraordinary evidence, that doesn't take away the neighbors. They exist out there irrespective of whether you look through your window or not. And my point is, reality doesn't really care how we ignore it. It just maintains, ignoring it maintains our ignorance. And that, unfortunately, would come to haunt us because you don't get a realistic assessment of where you are, of your environment, unless you collect all the evidence possible. So my point is, evidence is always good. And I just cannot understand how, if you just look at, online right now, you see a lot of scientists resisting the Pentagon report to Congress stating that there is clear evidence that there are some unidentified aerial phenomena and we don't know what they are. And so the scientists say, forget about it, business as usual. You just read the tweets of the, not just scientists, but popularizers of science like Neil deGrasse Tyson. And they just dismiss it, ridicule it, and get away.
Next time on Off-World UFO Report, we'll be looking at some of the top sightings anywhere in the world in history.
Oh my god! What the fuck? Tata! Tata!
I can't believe they considered that to be a UFO.